Other interesting business news, you have Rivian stock crashing 22.88% in one day. That is an impressive amount of ineptitude for a publicly traded company. You usually have to try to be that bad or to fail that hard. That is terrible. Now, this is coming after a couple days earlier. Last week, it was actually announced, oh yeah, they're losing $33,000 per Rivian sold, which, again, for a lot of startups, especially automotive, very capital intensive. You have not just the software development teams, you have the assembly lines. Understand, there's a huge upfront investment for automotive companies especially, so I'm not too surprised they're losing that much money per vehicle. Still not as bad as Lucid losing $338,000 per EV sold. Now, it looks like the stock actually went down last week to $18.27 per share, which, yeah, that's pretty bad considering where they came from. And the other reason I do not give financial advice, and I always tell people, if you're entrepreneurially inclined, one of the best bets you can make in life, just bet on yourself. Start a business, start a side hustle. You learn a lot about yourself, and you might even have some fun, and you might be able to prosper as well. Needless to say, I'm glad I did not invest my funds into Lucid when they had their IPO, or Rivian when they had their IPO. I mean, with Rivian, unfortunately, I feel bad for a couple of friends who did invest in them because Rivian, aesthetically speaking, their truck is very uniquely designed. And although I would never own it because it only has 2 pedals, which why would you ever want a boring life like that? Everything should have 3 pedals. It should always be manual. You pay more attention, you have more fun. But nevertheless, I know some people want to acquiesce to technology and EVs, but aesthetically speaking, it does look very unique. And for what it is, I can appreciate the styling of it. It turns head. I mean, it'll make you turn your head and look twice. And that got a lot of people excited. I know a lot of my friends actually placed pre-orders for that vehicle just because that, again, brilliant marketing, even though I might not agree with the product. Brilliant marketing where they have the truck where it does like the whole 360 because it has all the independent motors. That got a lot of people excited when they first had their IPO and they first getting people, interested. But looking at their IPO, they IPO'd at about $129.95 per share. So, and again, the price stock fluctuates, every second. So apologize if there's small inaccuracies based on pennies or even a couple dollars as we go through this topic. As of right now, and as I'm reporting this, they had their IPO at $129.95 per share on November 12th, 2021. Their share value, the price per share, has lost 85.44% of its value. Just erased. It's gone. Wow. I'm glad I did not invest in that. Although, I was going to say, you could probably debate how much of an investment I've gotten on the Topping Technologies laser engraved Porsche lighters we gave out at events, but nevertheless, it's still a better investment. In terms of their stock, that's, whole lifetime. In terms of the 1 month stock trend, they're down about 18%. It looks like the 6 month trend for Rivian is still up 27.75%. So it's not like they're going out of business. It's not that detrimental yet. It's certainly concerning if you own the stock. It's definitely not great news. And they don't even have the audacity. They have the audacity. They don't even pay you dividends. So there's not a lot of incentive to keep it unless you like that long-term gambling. Now, one of the reasons that the stock just precipitously dropped to such a dramatic amount of double digits was because they actually released news that they're going to be raising $1.5 billion in convertible notes. And it makes sense. They have to. They're burning through cash. And right now is not the best time to get a loan. The U.S. economy has been propped up by cheap cash for years under many presidents, many people in power. The Federal Reserve, perhaps a more appropriate, another topic for another time, but many businesses benefit from having basically 0% interest rates. Tech companies especially, and you see this in Silicon Valley, a lot of those companies, social media companies, they used to all be measured by how many users do you have. Now, the huge pivot is how profitable are you? How much of a profit do you really make? Which for years, they didn't really ask that question. No one really cared. So there's a really big shift in investing and just the thought and the whole framing of the situation. Now, I believe this is the first time we've actually discussed convertible notes on the show. So I'm going to go ahead and give you some good old-fashioned just Google definitions, or more accurately, Brave definitions. Now, They say that in finance, a convertible bond, convertible note, or convertible debt is a type of bond that the holder can convert into a specified number of shares of common stock in the issuing company or cash of equivalent value. It is a hybrid security with debt and equity-like feature. The downside is convertible notes have the potential to be dilutive and dilute earnings per share when they are converted into shares. Moreover, conversion by large note holders can lead to a shift in voting rights and control of the company to those new shareholders, unquote. So, rudimentarily speaking, when the stock is diluted, one of the reasons if you look at the Shark Tank, great show, they talk about, are you really sad you weren't able to invest in Ring? The Ring camera is a $1 billion idea. Amazon bought it for $1 billion. Didn't you lose out? And a lot of them will bring up the point of, well, not really, because everyone who invested in the company, their shares were heavily diluted. Because, again, that was a very capital-intensive investment for Ring to be successful, and they had to keep raising money again and again and again, taking in more money, taking in more investors, and the percentage that you own, your shares and how much you have, it became more and more diluted, so it was worth less and less and less. So that was the downside of that situation. That's why a lot of sharks really weren't too sad that they didn't have the opportunity, or they chose not to invest in Ring, because their shares were diluted so much because they had to keep raising money. Same situation here, or somewhat of a similar parallel, both tech companies. And in this case, depending on how the stock is doing, it's going to convert into more or less shares, and it's going to have a greater or lesser impact based on that. And it'll be interesting to see, this scared off a lot of investors. Again, it went down 22.88% in a single day last week, which again, that's a big dip. And again, they're still way down, 85% from their original IPO? And part of the precarious, troublesome thing with EV companies is I can't help but think a lot of them are propped up by false hopes in terms of everyone has the FOMO, the fear of missing out, because every company, every investment firm, every person keeps kicking themselves for not buying Tesla stock, including myself. Jeez Louise, what could have been? Another joke for another time about investing, but it's one of those things where Tesla went against all odds and they succeeded pretty much better than any automotive company in terms of public evaluation, their stock. And a lot of people are saying, man, I wish I could have invested that, because, again, if you did, you could have retired by now. So every time there's a new EV company, they keep thinking it could be the next Tesla. That's what everyone keeps saying. And unfortunately, the downside is that's how you get BS companies propped up, like Nikola, which ended up to be all vaporware in terms of they pretended to be a hydrogen-based trucking company. Turned out they had no intellectual property. Their founder, Trevor, I forget that SOB's name, unfortunately, at the moment, his last name, but he was actually, I think he's successfully prosecuted for fraud. Trevor something. Nevertheless, there's just so much fear of missing out. It'll be interesting to see how many people really have confidence in these companies based on concrete statistics, concrete evidence of them coming out with current product. I mean, in terms of EV startups, Rivian's ahead of the game in terms of they actually made a product, which just that in and of itself is a huge achievement, because so many companies don't even make it that far. So they're getting products, they're on the streets, and they had, in terms of like having a recall, they've had one major recall, or a recall that affected the whole fleet. I believe it's just because there's a loose nut. And that's not put on Washington, D.C. Politics later in the show. But they haven't had anything that's too detrimental. And nowadays, most automotive companies have a lot of recalls, and people are more forgiving than they used to be, I believe. So it'll be interesting to see, how does this affect your perception of Rivian? Are you still a fan of the company? Another issue is, these EV companies, another reason why I prefer 3 pedals and an internal combustion engine, my car could be fixed by Bob down the street, or myself if I were to be so inclined to dust off the manual. But with an EV vehicle, if Rivian goes out of business, who supports your vehicle? No one. It's locked down. You can't plug in your computer and actually diagnose it and fix it. It's all locked in, proprietary, just like an iPhone. And equally as disposable, I would argue as well, in terms of life cycle management. So that's another issue I don't think people are thinking about in terms of long-term ownership. That's another risk that people are taking on when you're having a newer company like Rivian. So does that affect your decision if you were to purchase this vehicle? Or, like me, if you were to buy a truck, would you want the one truck in North America that still comes with 3 pedals? The Toyota Tacoma. Can't believe it's so sad that all other trucking companies have acquiesced to having 2 pedals. How boring, how sad. Again, a very rare fun experience. I implore everyone to buy something with 3 pedals if they can financially do so, and enjoy that experience while they can. Or vote differently. We'll see what happens. Time, as I would say, shall tell. Thank you again, everyone, for taking the time to tune in today. I know it's ambitious, trying to get to 4,000 subscribers by the end of October. So if you can click that button, I would greatly appreciate it. Also, the comments are greatly appreciated, even if it's a critique. I appreciate that because that's how I want to make the show better and better together. Also, a like click does help the channel out as well. And apparently with the YouTube algorithm, perhaps that'll help the videos get shared more and more. But also, equally as important, don't forget to please take the time to tell your family, tell your friends, tell your coworkers, heck, tell your enemies, tell anyone and everyone. Just stay safe and fight the good fight.